Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Questions of Life. Today's question is posed by me, and I'm asking, what games have given you unforgettable and memorable experiences? So, not necessarily positive ones, it could be negative ones, but I mainly ask this question just so I can gush over some of my favorite games. So without further ado, let us commence the gushing. So, the first time I ever played a game was Mortal Kombat, and it was on a N64 controller. As I specify specifically a controller because there was a cartridge that you could put into the controller and then plug into your TV and play the game that way. I'm not entirely convinced that I wasn't playing some bootleg of, like, something else, but when I look back on it, it didn't look anything like an N64, which had a console and, like, the controller, which you would plug into the console. The only likeness it had was the controller. Anyways, young me really liked blood and gore and violence with Mortal Kombat, and I played that, but I was young and I was not adept at games, so I ended up tossing it when I figured out that I couldn't play it as well. So then I get Pokemon, and that part of my life was not very memorable. I never beat any of the Pokemon games, I just went through them until I got a Game Boy Advanced SP, and I get Pokemon Fire Red. I got Ruby prior to that, and I was playing that, but Fire Red was the first Pokemon game that I played and beat, and it was the first time I started noticing music in games, because I really loved the heck out of the final rival fight in the Pokemon League. That particular background music, I really liked that. And I started paying attention to game music more, and that brings me into my next point here, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team, which was the first time I encountered a compelling story in a game. Because before this, I'd played Mortal Kombat, Pokemon, and the stories in those games are not the best. So I end up beating Mystery Dungeon, and it kind of does this. It's like, hey, you see those cute critters there that you're playing as, or that you catch in the main games? You gotta play as one of those. Oh, and you see that heart over there? That's your heart. You know what I'm going to do to it? I'm going to stab it, rip it, and open up and make you cry like a little baby bitch. So, I did not end up crying like a little baby bitch, but I came really close, and I ended up shedding one single tear on Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Darkness. But Red Rescue Team will hold a special place in my heart because it's the first time that I encountered what Pokemon could be. Like, its storytelling and just how amazing it could possibly be. So, moving off of the SP and Game Boy Advanced era, we come to the GameCube, and this is the first time I encountered a game that made me rage really, really hard. First time I took my frustration out in the most dumb way possible. I was playing Scorpion King, Rise of the Acadian, and this was like right after the movie came out, but that game in particular, because it was a teen-rated game, and I was pretty young at the time, I didn't really understand what I had to do, so the game seemed a lot harder than it should have, but I raged super hard and got super frustrated, to the point where I took the game disc, and I smeared some whiteout all over the game part, so I'd never have to play it again. Not the top where, you know, the title is, but on the disc part where you have to read it, so never going to be able to play that thing again. Pretty sure I threw it away later on. Now, coming up then, in the GameCube era, we have The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which is the first game that I 100% completed. I got all the hearts, I went through the extra dungeon, I beat Ganon, I've done a bunch of challenge runs of the game, I caught the Golden Beetles, beat the Post Souls, or collected all the Post Souls, etc., etc., etc. I explored every little bit of it. I know every nook and cranny of Hyrule in Twilight Princess at this point. So, off of the GameCube, we're continuing this trend with GameCube or Nintendo consoles. In the Wii era of my life, I got introduced to Tales of Symphonia, the entire Tales series through Symphonia, and I am forever grateful because it was like a $40 pickup at a GameStop, and it just looked anime, and I was getting into anime at the time, I was interested in anime and still watching anime, and the game looked anime, and I was like, hey, look, anime, I'm gonna play anime, the game, Dawn of the Anime. And I I really loved it because fuck anyone who thinks that Symphonia is better, because Dawn of the New World has one thing that Symphonia will never have, or the original Symphonia will never have, and that is 3D movement, where you can move around the entire flat area as well as jump up and down and so on. Rather, in Symphonia, you can only go up or down, and you can go towards your enemy or away from your enemy. You can't run around the battlefield. So, fuck Symphonia for that. Good game though, but otherwise, Dawn of the New World was better. I've played Resident Evil 4, which was my first horror game. I'm going to put that in quotes, horror game. I looked up everything for it. It was kind of like the same experience as Twilight Princess, except I also got to experience what it feels like to have your balls shrivel up and tuck back inside of you at the speed of Clint Eastwood until they became ovaries. Because, oh my god, the tense parts of that game where you're running away from something or trying to do a quick time event or whatever it is, always made my testicles do that, and it hurt, okay? Whenever things got tense. So I always dreaded that a little bit. Even though I knew everything that would be coming, this body still went through that. So thanks, Resident Evil, for making my balls feel terrible. Let's see here. So off of the Nintendo consoles then, I'm going to move on to the Sony consoles, because in the PSP era of my life, never really played much on the PS2. I mean, I have one, but I got that after I had my PS3, so not many memorable games on that for me. But on my PSP, though, there's a bunch. I mentioned how I cried like a baby bitch, or not cried, but almost cried like a little baby bitch at the end of Red Rescue Team. On the PSP, there was one game that actually made me cry like a little baby bitch, and that was Crisis Core. The first time that I cried, I ended up like turning the game away and just like crying into a pillow. Because throughout the game you play as Zack, and at the end of it he dies, and that's it. That's the happiest you can get. That's the optimal ending. He dies. And I was just devastated. I was like, oh my god, what? No, you can't do that! And then the game did it, and I was super sad. So that was a experience that I hope never to have again, where I cry like a little girl at the end of a game. Anyways, on the vein of Final Fantasy, the first actual Final Fantasy game that I played was Final Fantasy 1, the remake for the PSP. And this was the first time I experienced figuring something out for myself and then actually being able to go and do it. Because Final Fantasy 1, I had just beaten the Lich, one of the first fiends, and I was frustrated because I didn't know where to go after that. So I just stopped playing until I came back like a few months later, and I played some more and explored the world. I also did the stupid thing where I wasn't paying attention to what was being read, or what was being said throughout the game, and I couldn't go back to check the text logs, which, thank God for modern games now, which have text logs so you can go back and see what was said in case you weren't paying attention. But I wasn't, and I got frustrated, but ended up figuring out where to go, and I felt that sweet satisfaction there. As well as going through all sorts of optional stuff as well. So, off of Final Fantasy then, my next PSP memorable moment was Persona 3 Portable. And this game really made me start paying attention to game music, because Shoji Meguro is a goddamn composer god, blessed by Apollo himself and every other musical god there is. So that game was my first introduction to SMT, and what really got me to start loving game music, which then plays into a role later on as to another game that I would end up playing. So moving off of the PSP, now we can move on to the PS3, which has a couple of games that are really bad for me. The first one is Final Fantasy XIII. Coming off of the high of Crisis Core and 1, I'd seen just how good Final Fantasy could be. I never played any of the other ones, but these two games were kind of in the forefront of my mind when Final Fantasy 13 came around. I was expecting a story that was as riveting as 7. I mean, I was 13 at the time, and I just thought that a main character dying at the end was something riveting. I didn't really know anything about good storytelling or anything of that sort, but I was expecting something to make me feel feelings, and I was expecting gameplay or exploration and adventure on par with that of Final Fantasy 1. So, when the first half of the game was just leading me down a hallway and cutscenes, and I wasn't able to explore, I was kind of disappointed. But then that leads me into my next game on the console as well, which is Time and Eternity, which is another one of those games that was hyped up a little bit, especially on Awarbor and Uchiha's part. They thought it was going to be a super good game, and they got the collector's edition and all that, because they thought, oh, it was going to be really, really, really good, and that ended up being really, really bad, and then it became a meme for me to constantly say how good of a game it was. And by the way, it is still the best game ever. Played it twice. Never regret a single second of it, at all. That game and Final Fantasy 13 made me start seeing that I should stop having high expectations for games. Games are modern art and things that should be taken at face value and not be hyped up super hard like everything else, which is this unfortunate piece of our gaming culture where trailers and leaks and all sorts of other things are coming out to spoil parts of games and make us build up high expectations. And those two games just made me start seeing that maybe I should stop having those high expectations and just enjoy the game for what it is when I play it, rather than, being building it up in my head. So there's that. And that's it for console games. I want to move on to independent games made by independent people, such as The Witch's House. And The Witch's House was the first time I ever played a horror RPG. I saw Markiplier play it, and I thought to myself, oh no, you need to stop playing it. And so I paused the video, and then I went to play it. It was the same thing that happened with Persona 3, where I saw someone else play it for the first couple of hours of gameplay, and I thought to myself, holy shit, I need to play that game. So I went ahead and downloaded it and played it, and my god, the story of that game still haunts me. It's not the first time I came across a game that would haunt my memories, but this one just really hits hard at the end. There's no happy ending whatsoever. At least with Crisis Core, there was some inkling that, Zack or Cloud was going to live on and be the legacy of Zack. Cloud would live on to be the legacy of Zack. In The Witch's House, there's none of that happiness. No, this game is just pain and suffering. But RPG horrors, then I went on to start playing Eve, Madfather, Crooked Man, all sorts of other free RPG Maker games, as well as Corpse Party. And I love all of those games. They are a great genre. So now I had mentioned how Persona 3 had gotten me to start noticing video game music. So a funny story of how I came across Undertale, which is my favorite game ever made of all time. So I was just listening to gaming music. It was like I was doing homework or something, but suddenly this pops into my playlist. And then there's this goat, and I'm thinking, oh great, I just starting to listen to some furry garbage here. No, and I wasn't, because then I started listening to the music and went, oh my god, this is really, really good. And I just kept listening to it. I heard Megalovania, I heard Hopes and Dreams, I heard the Asgore theme long before I had started playing Undertale. And then I go and look up some of the Undertale stuff. I see that it's some weird 8-bit game, and I don't start actually playing it until Markiplier pulls it up and starts playing it. And I see it, the same thing that happened with The Witch's House and with Persona 3. I immediately went, I need to play this game after I saw like just a few seconds of it. So I did. I ended up spending the $10 that the game cost, and I ended up playing it, and I loved it. Throughout the entire game, I could really hear in the music itself the amount of care and effort that Toby Fox put into each of the pieces, as well as like the sound design and music is on point. There are points in the game where it just comes in at the right time when like things hit and the words hit you and the story hits you and everything just melds together perfectly into a amazing experience that I am super glad that I had the chance to play through. So that's it for my gushing. This video went on a little longer than I expected, but stayed on point the entire time. So thank you all for watching, and remember, drive fast, take chances.